Let's rewrite the ending of Game of Thrones. This video will be rewriting the final episode of the series, and it will follow on from our rewrite of the Battle of King's Landing and Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells, which we did previously. I recommend watching that first to get the full story between these two episodes, but in case you don't, here's a summary. Otherwise, go to this moment to skip it. Previously on Game of Thrones, the Allied armies arrive at King's Landing to take the throne from Cersei, who has holed herself up in the Red Keep with thousands of civilians for protection. Jon raises concerns that the Northmen are exhausted and will abandon the cause, while Tyrion plans out the strategy for the assault before bringing Drogon in. Tyrion frees Jaime, who makes his way to Cersei before the battle begins, but he finds that he cannot bring himself to kill her. He still loves her. The attack begins, and by the first night, 100 of Cersei's men surrender. Though unarmed, Varys and Tyrion watch Daenerys burn half of them alive as an example to the others. Varys' attempt to poison Dany fails and results in his own horrific death. As victory seems near for the Northmen and Allied armies, it is revealed Cersei has planted dozens of wildfire barrels across the city. Jaime watches in horror as King's Landing burns. Northmen, Lannisters, Unsullied, Dothraki, women and children alike. And Davos dying in the chaos. Broken and weary, a number of Northmen try to abandon the battle, but Daenerys burns them alive as traitors and deserters. Afraid of what she has become and realizing he must put his duty to the North first, Jon leads the remaining Northmen from the battle. Daenerys only has one chance, to burn the Red Keep and kill thousands of civilians holding up there, or to not take the throne. At the last moment she turns away, putting innocence before her ambition and proving she is not her father, maintaining her moral character at the cost of the throne. She is then shot down, surrounded, and chooses to die among her Unsullied and Dothraki, who have always stood by her. The battle for King's Landing is done. Also, did you know that I have a book coming out on May 30? Yeah, crazy but true, and like 4 days away. I'm hyped and terrified and nervous and so many other feelings. It's called On Writing and World Building, and it's got chapters on everything from how to write a first chapter to how to world build polytheistic religions, if that's your sort of thing. All based on my YouTube writing series, and you can maybe win a free copy by signing up to Patreon and supporting the channel. Links to all of that down below. Thank you to all of you who already have. Game of Thrones. Episode 6 opens. The Iron Throne. We begin with Cersei, Euron and Jaime moments after the wildfire canisters were set off, killing thousands of soldiers and civilians alike. Jaime is troubled and distant. What did you do? Qyburn knew that they would breach the walls. We only needed long enough to lure them in. You didn't just kill them. You killed women, children, women like you carrying babes in their womb. I did it for our baby. Euron overhears Cersei admitting that the baby is not his. He learns that he has been lied to, and he goes to draw his sword, saying he'll cut that one from her and put another one in. The mountain stands forward and Jaime draws a sword. Euron backs away. Always wanted to be the man who killed Jaime Lannister, but not today. I'll just take the Iron Fleet somewhere else. He leaves. So the ending for Euron in the show doesn't really work in the sense that having him fight Jaime Lannister to the death really did nothing for either of the characters. It sort of felt like they just didn't know how to finish him off, so they're just like, hey, what if Jaime kills him? Oh, how are they gonna do that? Like, he washes up on the shore in just the right place and kind of just goes with it. Ah, yeah, that works. While the most thematically resonant end would be for him and Yara to have some kind of showdown for the Iron Islands, it really doesn't work within this narrative framework, and would probably require more setup and time than we have in 2 episodes. It would have had to have been fed into over the entirety of the season. But Euron is exactly the kind of character who knows when to just leave and does. So that's what I'm having him do here. He's got nothing more to gain, so he just leaves. And having all of the villains killed would kind of give us too much of a perfect happy ending. Cersei, you can't. Jaime remembers what he did last time this happened, that he killed the Mad King moments before King's Landing was set alight. This time, he was too late, and it was because he was too weak. Cersei embraces him. We won, brother. Now we can be who we are. Who we are, Jaime mutters. The Queen's guards stand around them, eyeing him closely. I love you, sister, as I love the worst of me. At that, he drives his sword through her chest, killing her and their unborn child. Grief, pain, and relief running through his mind, having bested his most deeply rooted demon, his face deadpan, and emotionless. The Queen's Guard immediately draw their blades and run him through. The two twins bleed out side by side, their blood mixing on the ground. This ending for Jaime and Cersei works a lot better for a few reasons. Firstly, it's more fitting that in spite of her victory, Cersei is defeated by her own character flaws, much the same way as Daenerys is. Her cruelty and apathy is what indirectly causes the deaths of her children, especially Tommen. It fits that it should cause her final demise, now losing the Iron Fleet through her deceitfulness with Euron, and her apathy and cruelty towards others is what drives Jaime to kill her, who has changed as a person. Secondly, while I can see the nuance in having Jaime still love Cersei, as people do relapse into addictive, toxic relationships, that doesn't invalidate his growth as a character. But I feel that he definitely earned this moment of redemption where he overcomes his most deeply rooted demon in Cersei. And having it come about after Cersei doesn't tell him what their plan is really marks out the moral difference between them. Thirdly, having the end of Jaime's arc being to kill a monarch who uses wildfire on the people of King's Landing to protect themselves has a beautiful symmetry, that he has come to terms with the fact that his two most honourable acts have been kingslaying and kinslaying, bringing his character arc full circle. He is a definitively honourable man, even if only he knows it. Lastly, and this is more of a meta reason, it gives more meaning to the repeated lines in the books. We came into this world together, and we'll leave it together, and fulfills the Valonqar prophecy. Scene 2. We follow the Northmen who abandoned the field of battle, Jon at their helm. Tyrion is travelling with them, and they do not yet know of Cersei and Daenerys' fate. Jon assures Tyrion that Daenerys would retreat if she needed to, but Tyrion doubts it. If she doesn't make it, says Tyrion, the people will want you. You're the last Targaryen, you can hold the loyalty of the North and Dorne. He explains that Varys sent out ravens to the lords of Westeros that he was the true heir before his death. I don't want it, Jon repeats. That doesn't matter if the lords of Westeros put you there. After a moment he asks, tell me, what do you want, Jon Snow? A warm pool in a mountain cave. Tyrion stares away into the distance. Scene 3. Once again, we return to King's Landing, where in the heat of battle, Arya and the Hound have slipped inside the keep itself. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I am really not a fan with what they did to Sandor Clegane in the show. His character arc was done when he found peace in the Sept, and bringing him out of that has done nothing to further his character. But the showrunners really wanted that #hype spectacle Clegane Bowl, and it's very difficult to make both the Hound and Arya convincingly turn away from their vengeance quests, at least in a writing sense. So backed into a corner, here we are. Watching from afar, they see Qyburn emerge into the courtyard, calling for the people to gather. The Queen's Guard, the Mountain included, surround him. At this point, we get a moment much like we see in the show where the Hound tells Arya that she doesn't want a life of revenge, that she doesn't want to end up like him. And this actually does work to an extent. Confronted with her darkest natures by the man who pushed her to indulge in them originally, she lets him go and she watches. I don't really see Arya turning away from her quest unless she sees the example of the Hound. And I don't really see the Hound turning away from it just because Arya tells him not to. Qyburn declares, people of King's Landing, the dragon usurper has been cast down and defeated, but such victory came at a great cost to her grace, the queen who guarded you from the horrors. An assassin was sent to kill her in the night and they took her from us. The people reel until the Mountain catches sight of the Hound in the crowd. That's right. Here I am, he calls. The Mountain moves down the steps. The crowd grows silent. Qyburn orders him to stop, but the monolith grabs him by the skull and breaks him on the steps. Terrified, the people scatter. Their duel begins and it ends in the Mountain dead and Sandor mortally wounded. Arya goes to him and she gives him the gift of death. In Season 4, Arya leaves the Hound to die painfully instead of killing him. As an act of vengeance, he was on her list after all. She still saw him as a monster. Killing him here, giving him the gift of mercy, has a literary symmetry that represents her leaving vengeance behind where she didn't once before. After this, she rides out of King's Landing. Scene 4. We return to Tyrion, who has arrived with the Northmen in the Riverlands. A raven then arrives from King's Landing explaining Daenerys and Cersei were both killed, leaving the Iron Throne empty. Tyrion cries in private, broken for his brother, throwing his work and candles aside in anger. Jon arrives and the two confide in one another, drinking in silence, and they share a moment of grief for Dany. Then, days later, in the quiet of the night, he hears a crossbow tightening behind him. Bronn has returned. Cersei's deader than a flea-bottom whore at 40, and the Dragon Queen too. Now who's gonna get me my castle? The fighting is done, Bronn. I told you I still had a few killing days left in me. I can't give you Highgarden as the hand to a dead queen, but you're not going to kill me. Maybe I'll just do it out of spite for you Lannisters screwing me around all these years. He eyes him closely. No, you won't. Bronn lifts the crossbow, biting his lip. You're right. No, I won't. Nice to know we're still friends. Not killing you is a pretty low bar for friends, you know. I've had to lower the bar in recent years. Had friends before, had a wife or two before, but they're all gone now. You want a drink? Only if you put down that crossbow. And as they begin to drink, Tyrion thinks back on how, from his perspective, so much that has happened has been in protecting the Lannister name. Tywin's obsession with his legacy ironically led to the near destruction of the Lannister house, and he says, I can't give you Highgarden, but I can give you something else. I'm Lord of the Westerlands now, much as my beloved father would roll in his grave. Let's make him roll a little more. Castle Rock. It's yours. You'd be a nobody, like me. Tyrion laughs, and in that moment he chooses to turn his back on the Lannister family name, hating how it caused so much war, so much personal torment for him, and he chooses to spite his father one more time. I'll finally be rid of the Lannister name, just like father always wanted. And at that, he signs over lordship of the Westerlands to Bronn, making true on his promise. This ending works for Tyrion in two ways. First, in a harsh irony that Tywin's obsession with the Lannister name causes its very destruction through Tyrion. Secondly, by leaving behind Casterly Rock and the Lannister name, Tyrion is able to leave behind the baggage that caused the death of his brother, sister, and the source of his torment. He only found true purpose when serving others not so much as a Lannister, but as himself. And now he is free to do that. Tyrion follows Jon around, explaining that it's only a matter of time before the houses of Westeros declare for his claim as king, especially the North, the Vale, and Dorne, the three powerful regions remaining. But it's clear that he doesn't want it. He's just walking away from the issue. All these names, titles, Lord, King, Protector. I never had any of it, and now I'm meant to have them all, he says. Tyrion then gets an idea. Then who would you abdicate in favour of? I need to talk to Sam. Part 5. Jon mourns for Dany alone before he meets Samwell in the forest. Sam tells him that he would be a good king, that he believes in him, but Jon says he doesn't know about that. He didn't put his duty before love once before, he could do it again. And while he's had a lot of experience fighting, the one time he truly led anything in the Night's Watch, they turned on him and killed him. He remembers Ygritte, and the two reminisce about how far they've come from the lowest of the Night's Watch. All that reading paid off, says Jon. I could make you king, replies Samwell. Jon explains that Tyrion mentioned abdication, and Sam confirms that Duncan Targaryen once abdicated in favour of his brother Jaehaerys. There would be better kings than me, Jon says. Who? I want you to witness a letter for me. The scene cuts away. Scene 6. The scene opens with Tyrion writing a letter to Sansa by candlelight, when Samwell joins him and places Jon's letter on the table, sealed with Stark wax. You know who Jon would abdicate in favour of? I do, Tyrion says grimly. We'll gather them here, along the Trident. But an imp, a maester, and a letter won't be enough for the lords and ladies of Westeros. The aftermath. The war may be over, but the effects of it are not. Effects that were usually explored before, but less so in recent seasons, which is why it perhaps felt so different from seasons 1 to 4. In this scene, the Northmen arrive in a small village of the Riverlands governed by the minor house Woad. Peasants ask them if they are coming from the capital with famine carts, which had stopped coming in the weeks leading up to the battle, and that now they were starving going into winter. They also note that refugees from King's Landing had been passing through, stealing from their remaining food stores. Unable to spare them food, Jon helps bury their dead, and he sees what's been happening in Westeros. He also learns that a number of minor houses in the Crownlands, the area that was usually governed by the Iron Throne directly, had been claiming territory in skirmishes after the death of Queen Cersei. The war is over, but its effects are definitely not. Part 7. Weeks pass and a council of all the great houses of Westeros are gathered in the Riverlands to decide the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. Sansa, Robin Arryn, Bronn, Lord Royce, the Prince of Dorne, Queen Yara, Gendry Baratheon, Edmure Tully and Tyrion are all gathered together. Samwell stands before them and summarizes what has happened to the throne with the death of Daenerys and Cersei alike. He points that Gendry is the bastard son of Robert, who was king, but he was legitimized by Daenerys. But Gendry argues that he does not have the skill in statecraft and that the people of King's Landing would not want a king legitimized by an invader. Edmure Tully gives his speech and is ordered down by Sansa in much the same fashion. The Prince of Dawn then asks where Jon Snow is, the Northmen and Targaryen to whom they owe their allegiance, and Samwell nervously explains that he left and abdicated his claim to the throne, to the shock of all, but he left a will in favour of another for the throne. He presents the letter, which he verifies as Jon's writing, signature and seal, as a maester and as his friend. Robin Arryn asks who, and Samwell reads the letter aloud. I, Jon Snow, called Aegon Targaryen by birthright, heir to the Iron Throne as the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, hereby abdicate my claim to the throne in favour of Tyrion of House Lannister, whom has proved himself as a strategist in the Battle of Blackwater, a faithful hand to two monarchs and leader, master of coin, and skilled in ways that I am not. The Prince of Dawn scoffs and protests that this was orchestrated in Jon's absence, even a conspiracy, but Samwell explains that he knows that this was what Jon wanted, before Sansa speaks in favour of Tyrion, saying she knows him to be honest and concerned with justice and not power. Hearing this from Jon's own sister, the prince backs down. Sansa then demands a vote, and one by one the kingdoms make their bid. The Vale, the Stormlands, the Riverlands, and the Tyrells each vote for Tyrion. Tyrion gives a subtle nod to Sansa, indicating they had some kind of pre-negotiated deal. I know you to be a good ruler, but too many Northmen have died in the Great War and Last War to kneel again. We knelt to the dragons, and the dragons are gone. The North will remain an independent state, as will the Iron Islands, as will Dorne. These three kingdoms have always had a tenuous relationship with the Iron Throne, and they were only really loyal to the Targaryens. All agreed, and with all the votes counted, Samwell stands to declare it decided, with Tyrion as the new protector of the realm, before Tyrion stops him. Lady Sansa is right, and not just for the North. I've seen too many queens and kings ruin the lives of those in lands they've never been to or seen. We all bent to the dragons. Lannisters, Arryns, Baratheons and Tyrells. Jon abdicated in my name, but I am no dragon. Sansa knows the North as you know the Vale, Lord Arryn, or you know Dorne, Prince Martell. I will not rule you. The remaining lords then one by one agree to secede, returning Westeros to the 7 independent kingdoms. But in this rewrite, the meeting won't end there. There has been a pattern of acknowledging real-world problems in Season 7 and 8, but then them not really having any real impact on the story, like Sansa raising, how are we gonna feed dragons, and a whole army, and Daenerys is just like, we'll just do it. The Crownlands are traditionally ruled by the Iron Throne directly, and they would be disputed if all of the 7 kingdoms secede. Tyrion raises that minor houses of the Crownlands are eating away at one another, while the remaining civilians of King's Landing are fleeing as refugees, and that the region will collapse without help. Edmure Tully would press his claim to the lands, because they had been ruled by the Riverlands prior to Aegon's invasion, but this claim would be disputed. No lord would let him have the most populated and thus one of the richest cities in the country. Gendry then proposes halving the Crownlands to be ruled between the Baratheons and the Tullys along the northern branch of the Blackwater River, which is agreed to, if tentatively, but when he suggests sharing governance of King's Landing, Tyrion steps in and points out that that's a recipe for war without a marriage to bind them, and with neither Gendry having any sons or daughters. After a time of silence, he suggests that the land outside the walls is ruled by their houses, but the city itself is made independent, following the government structure of the free city of Braavos, where a ruler is elected from among the nobles and important of the city. Here this would be a mixture of the High Septon, the wealthy, and whoever else is required to keep the peace, for example the head of the Goldcloaks. With that agreed, the meeting is called to an end by Samwell. Sansa and Tyrion meet in the aftermath, and he thanks her for her support despite the outcome, to which she says it was a small price to pay for northern independence, but she admires him for turning down the crown. Tyrion explains that he's not the first man to turn down the throne, and it's for the best anyway, adding the lords would have made Jon king against his will if he appeared. Samwell points that he's already died for Westeros once before, not going to ask him to do it a second time. Samwell asks why Tyrion did it though, and Tyrion replies, I've always had a soft spot for cripples, broken things, and bastards. With a great sigh, Tyrion confesses that he doesn't know what he'll do now, given he left the Westerlands to Bronn, which he finds oddly freeing, like a burden has been suddenly lifted. And then Sansa brings out the hand of the Queen pin. Smiling, he accepts the role. This ending works from a character and a world-building perspective. Firstly, it makes Tyrion's final act of the series a stroke of masterful political manipulation, for which he was known earlier on, promising Sansa independence and using Samwell's respect as a maester before getting the rest to secede. Secondly, this ending works from a world-building perspective because the Lords of Westeros would pick someone they A, all knew and trusted to some degree, and B, knew had some experience with ruling. Bran does not have this in the slightest, and Tyrion's line about how we're all united around stories is complete nonsense, let alone the fact that most of the lords and ladies there wouldn't have any faith in Bran's supposed abilities, let alone the fact that they don't necessarily translate to good ruling. They don't know what the Three-Eyed Raven is, they may not even believe in his powers, they don't really know what it means for him to hold the memory of humanity, and it feels wildly inconsistent with his characterization throughout the rest of the series.
Bran has no interest in ruling.
In all honesty, the most realistic outcome would be to pick someone we probably haven't met but is out there, that the others know and trust and has some experience, but I don't think that within a meta-narrative kind of sense they're going to pick a character we've never met before, so apparently that's not really an option. But it does make world-building sense that as Sansa declares the North independent, so would the other states, seizing this moment of power, leaving behind the very thing that has caused so much strife. The Iron Throne. The goodbyes. Sansa and Arya return to the north when Bran tells them that they need to head into the Godswood, that he sees something there. There they find Jon sharpening his blade next to the weirwood tree, just the same as we saw Ned did all those years before. He says his farewells to Sansa, that she will make a better queen than he ever would as king, and he thanks her for helping. He asks Arya if she will stay in Winterfell, and she declares that she won't, that she will head west of Westeros, to where the maps stop. And Jon says he's proud of her. He warns Sansa how dangerous it is to be king and that just as many people want to kill you as love you, to which she replies Sir Brienne will be a faithful master of the Northern Guard. Final goodbyes. In the north, Arya sets sail with the Stark direwolf on the sails while Sansa is anointed queen in the north with Brienne at her side. Afterward, Brienne details the great deeds of Jaime Lannister, Kingslayer and honourable man. Jon arrives at the breach in the wall made by Viserion, with Tormund and Ghost awaiting him in the distance. He goes to his direwolf and he hugs him closely. He tells him he's a good boy, and they walk off into the far north alongside Tormund. At peace, at last. This ending works in a couple of dimensions. Firstly, the idea of Jon taking the throne never quite sat that right with me. The idea of the unknown heir to the throne, the chosen one rising up and taking the crown, is very traditional fantasy storytelling that Martin usually tries to avoid, and Ghost heading north in those episodes beforehand may have foreshadowed Jon going north as well. There's just that nice bit of continuation of that theme. Finally, Jon's story has always been a struggle between finding peace and being forced into doing your duty. In the Night's Watch, with being the king in the north, he has never really found happiness and peace except when he was beyond the wall. He has done his duty, and now he is allowed peace. In the final scene, the focus shifts back to Winterfell, where the story all began. Tyrion is holding his first small council meeting in the north. He has appointed Samwell Tarly as Grand Maester of the North. Sir Davos' seafaring son, Stannis Seaworth, is named Master of Ships in Davos' memory, and a number of other unnamed characters are named to their position for merit and stability in the realm. Sansa begins with the food issue as winter steeps, with Tyrion suggesting that they need to plant more winter vegetables, but he also admits that the horrific reality of the Great War has somewhat alleviated their food stores given how many died. The music ramps up, and episode 6 closes. The game is at its end.